Stream's transferring over. Here's the agenda. And we'll get started. Testing and release updates. Um, the I know there is an issue with a malformed test vector that is fixed on the 1.0 candidate release branch, but I have not yet released another update to that. Um, I know a lot of you have a temporary workaround just by modifying that file manually. Um, there's a couple of additional test vectors I'd like to get merged in, and then I can get those up. Additionally, we are looking into kind of some test vector reform um, to reduce the overall size, reduce the amount of time to generate, and to get those um, fork choice tests integrated and kind of built off PySpec. Xiaowei and myself are going to dig into that over the coming weeks. So hopefully some good stuff. We'll try not to like pull the format out from underneath you before mainnet, but probably soon after we will release kind of a reformed test vector. Generally the same structure, but with some slight modifications. Other testing and release updates. Okay, cool. Moving on, I'd like to talk about the state of Adasha. I know we've all kind of been chatting about it. I just want to see where people are at. The leak is working. No fundamental consensus errors, but it does look like we are seeing instabilities probably every like 4 to 8 epochs. Um, I know that Prism is looking into some optimizations and what might look like kind of a DOS vector that's popping up. Are there any other kind of fundamental issues or resource consumption issues that have arisen with any other clients?
So we've been suffering high resource usage on Teku, but that's been constant. Wouldn't explain the periodic drops, and is now fixed. So I don't think that relates.
Gotcha, thanks. Very cool. Um, let's. It's obviously something we need to fix. Let's hear the client updates, and then we can talk about this more outside the call. Thank you. So let's move on to client updates. Teku can start us off.
Hey guys, so our audit is complete. We're happy with the outcome and we'll share the final report when it's available. We pushed a few performance improvements related to Madasha not finalizing. To reduce memory consumption, we reworked our state regeneration logic so that queued tasks are no longer holding on to state references. Um, we eliminated some extra processing that we were doing at finalization that could cause the node to pause after a long period of non-finalization. Basically, we were previously regenerating finalized states so that they could be stored, and instead we now just store finalized states that are immediately available. We also found a nice optimization related to our get ancestor calculation. We moved that logic closer to the proto-array code so that the lookups are a lot quicker and more efficient. Um, Other updates outside of Madasha, we've updated to Discovery version 5.1. We've been working to implement the standard REST API and handling a few issues raised related to that. We've done some work to improve our SSE serialization. For large beacon states, we've seen a 20x speed up. We started work to sync the client from a recent state. This is in progress, so those flags are currently hidden. And related to this, I posted a question about how we should be handling blocks by range requests. when historical data is missing. I can go into that now if that makes sense.
Let's talk about it during networking section.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then that's it for us.
Great. Congrats on some of those optimizations. 20x speed up is huge. Let's go on to Lighthouse.
Hey everyone. So for Lighthouse, we've made a release that updates us to the version 1 of the spec. So we are joining Eth2.0 on Medasha with that. Also, we've updated to DISV 5.1, so we're also on board with 5.1 on Medasha. We've been finishing up some of the Eth2 standard API endpoints. There were some discrepancies, so we're working through those to hopefully get everything sorted. We've also been adding HTTP API endpoints onto our validator client. This is to kind of facilitate a UI that we're building to help onboard users and make it a little bit easier to use. We've been monitoring for quite a while now our gossip sub 1.1 scoring kind of parameters. So we've got a node or a few nodes that actually have those implemented and just seeing how they score other peers. So our plan is to kind of merge those down. But in order to do that, everyone has to kind of agree on the latest gossip subspec. We've also been doing a number of performance updates similar to everybody else, specifically in reducing some memory. And we've been tracking various bug fixes, bugs that have occurred due to some libp updates and some various updates through the code bases as things haven't finalized. That's pretty much it from us.
Gotcha. And I might bring up those 1.1 parameters during network section as well. Thank you. Lodestar.
Hey, so we've been working on getting our pub sub up to spec. Turns out we didn't have the signature policy, strict sign, strict no sign implemented. So we're resolving that. We merged in our validator slashing protection interchange and kind of refactor that to handle all slashing cases. We are finishing up with the standard REST API. We thought we were finished, but we hadn't implemented the state pieces under the state URL. And we are trying to finish up a refactor of our core chain logic because we're wanting to pull that out into a separate module or a separate package that could hopefully be used independently of Lodestar. And we're kind of still trying to gear up for another release. And once we get all of our in-flight PRs merged, should be ready.
Got it. Thanks, Kevin. Prism.
Hey guys, so we had our first beta release, promoting from alpha to beta. That was a really big jump for us. We've never really done breaking changes all throughout the process, so it was the first time we had a chance to really get rid of legacy code, promote features that were in V2 to just the default, and overall just make a lot of improvements. Regarding the Medallia incident, yes, we're investigating. I think we might have a potential fix found by Nishant. So mostly has to do with kind of like retrieving information from disk and times of no finality and some mismatches between cache retrievals and maybe times where we don't fetch from the cache. So yeah, so we'll see if that helps the resolution today. Also have been working on the standard Eth2 API, just been implementing the endpoints by category, and that's been going okay. Aside from that, yeah, like we're just trying to knock out as many issues as possible before mainnet. I think we had like 100 open issues and a lot of things going on, and now we're I think around 70 or less than 70. So overall, just trying to get into mainnet with as few open items as possible, just knocking them out one after another. The Trailer Bits audit went pretty well, so we've been resolving all those audit-related items and just trying to harden security as time goes on. Just taking it one day at a time and trying to just do as much as we can.
Got it. Thank you. And Nimbus.
Hi. Like everybody else, we've deployed Discovery 5.1 and BOS v4 on Medasha. We use the current state of Medasha to test how it must behave when the situation is rough. We introduced some new optimizations, and currently we are running pretty stable, even though the network has long penetration period. But our memory usage stays roughly the same. We are working on some new benchmark targets that make file targets that you allow everyone to run our benchmarks more easily. Last week, I reported that we are working on a way to start the beacon node from a weak subjectivity checkpoint state. And in this mode, there is one relatively complicated problem of how you produce new blocks. I mentioned it last week. We've now reduced the required data to do this to just the state of the deposit contract. I'm again curious if any of the other teams has worked on this problem because I see some potential for standardizing the format of the checkpoint states that all the clients could work with. And that's it for us.
Thank you. And I believe that is all the client teams. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we can, when we bring up networking and talk a little bit about blocks by range, Zaira, you can pose your question then. See if there's any feedback. On to research updates. Does anybody want to get us started?
I can talk about updates to the phase 1 and of data availability work that we've been doing. So I guess the update there is that so recently we've been exploring this kind of expedited data availability focused phase 1 direction, which will bring in shards as kind of explicit data shards and use CAT commitments and some other tools to make sure that we can kind of very easily do a data availability sampling. And so lately we've been looking into like exactly what kind of subnet structure data availability sampling requires. Proto has been starting to make a concrete implementation of both the erasure coding and commitment side and the subnet side. I wrote up in the process of writing up a document. So that work is proceeding quietly but well. At this point, one of the challenge things that we're thinking about right now is exactly what the concrete structure in terms of proposals will look like, and this is as good an opportunity as any to try to see if we can do things like staggering to try to get the kind of shard block time down to like much less than 1 slot. So I published a blurb on ETH Research about that problem, and we're talking about possible solutions at the moment. So that is, I guess, still going, and the goal of this is to move as quickly as we can towards something that we can live test in some kind of sharded peer-to-peer environment.
Thank you, Vitalik. Other research updates?
One question. Which type of erasure codes are you looking at?
Just standard Reed-Solomon codes using a finite field with the curve being the same as the VLS curve. We don't really have a choice in regard because we needs to be compatible with the CAT commitments, which we'll have to use BLS 12.381 for.
Thank you. Other research updates?
Okay, so this will probably should go in networking, but I would say just to give an update, we keep working on the network crawler. So at this point, we are able to gather a bunch of information with this very light client that is based on rumor. We get peer ID, node ID, client type and version, IP, multi-address. We can also figure out the country and the city of each client and the latency of each client. We subscribe to all the 5 gossip subtopics. I will put on the chat a complete report of what we are able to do with the crawler up to this point. That's it. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, it'd be great to see that data. Any other updates before we move on? Okay, great. Moving on to networking. One of the big things to talk about is what Meredith brought up, which is once you've started from wake subjectivity state, what do you do about serving blocks? Because you might be getting block requests outside of since you've synced the chain. Presumably you've at least have the blocks since that state that you started from, but that state could be pretty near the head. This is in a slight hand waving. This is handled kind of in the spec. It says that blocks by range requests should be served within the weak subjectivity sync period. The intention there, and this was written probably well over a year ago and needs to be refined based on these discussions, but the intention there is if the weak subjectivity period is 2 weeks and you started with something from 2 days ago, you should backfill the blocks through those 2 weeks and be able to serve through those 2 weeks. You could also backfill all the way to Genesis, but that's not requisite for the function, like the baseline functionality of the protocol. That can and should probably be refined and made more explicit. My intuition on the actual granularity of the question of if somebody makes a request and you should you what should you do if you don't have the blocks? Yeah, we need to think through that. I think what I responded to is more like, what is the expectation when you're actually syncing from somebody, and what is like kind of can you consider malicious behavior or not, and really being able to serve through that range is kind of the baseline expected functionality. But if you don't have a block, we do need to figure out which of those to do. Does anybody do anything here right now? Yeah, Meredith.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quickly, like we're planning to backfill blocks, but even if you're backfilling blocks, there'll be some period of time where you're still in the process of doing that.
Right.
So like you still need to be able to figure out what is an explicit way to handle this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Are other teams handling this case currently?
We're not handling it, but I thought a general idea might be that we could indicate what blocks we support in either the ENR or the metadata, so that you know what blocks a peer supports and you shouldn't ask it for ones that it doesn't.
Right. Metadata does seem like a reasonable place. Maybe the absence of information implies that you support at least through weak subjectivity period, which we can make a more explicit definition in the spec, and then an explicit data and metadata would imply something more explicit, like you support beyond that range. But still, there's kind of the corner case of you are backfilling. Yeah, I suppose when you're backfilling, you could also, and you have less than the weak subjectivity period, you could still specify as such. But it still begs the question of if somebody asks you something outside of that metadata, you need to respond with something, which is either error or empty. I would presume error, a more explicit error rather than emptiness, because emptiness might imply that there's just nothing on that range. and then when you get something else from somebody else on that range, it looks malicious.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction we were heading. Also, in terms of like signaling what blocks are available, I think ideally it would be nice if that was on the status message, because we kind of query status periodically, so we have an updated view of where our peers are at. So, you know, you could kind of update your range as you backfill, but we don't have that right now, so.
Right. How frequently is metadata passed? What are the rules on that? I'm looking them up myself right now. I guess there are no rules. When are people practically calling metadata? Is anyone using get metadata at all? Okay, I will circle back with y'all outside of this call if we don't know right now. Adrian, you keep unmuting. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I can't remember. It's related to the ping, right? We check the ping and then we get the number, and then if it's out of date, we update it. We do a ping every 30 seconds.
Right, okay.
We don't do ping at all, for example.
What was that, Zari?
We are not using ping yet. That's what I wanted to mention.
I see. But yeah, you're right, Adrian. In the ping, you send your metadata sequence number, and if it's out of date, you update. Meredith, are you all using that protocol?
Yeah, I was just trying to look up and find the actual number. It looks like we're pinging every 10 seconds.
Yeah, we ping like twice an epoch. So, but we mostly just look at peers that are subscribed to the particular subnets from Gossip Sub, and also use that mostly.
Right, for the atnets things.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, so this should land either in status or metadata. I'll take a look at both those protocols and write a quick issue on the spec repo, and we can talk about it there, and try to refine how to handle this edge case. Sounds good? Great. Zari, you again had the question of when you've done weak subjectivity sync and you don't necessarily have information through Genesis, how do you handle block production, especially with respect to ETH1 data, right? Can you pose that question more concretely?
When one option is to discuss it offline. I started kind of a message for this in the weak subjectivity Telegram. I believe everyone is there. But the short version is that you need to produce Merkle proofs for the newly added deposits in new blocks. And to produce these Merkle proofs, the current spec says that you need the entire set of deposits from the start, from Genesis. It's not very complicated, although a bit tricky, to create an algorithm that doesn't use all of the deposits, but only the state of the deposit contract, the node array, which is incrementally used to create the deposit root. And I mean, from one hand, we can share like how we did this. And then it would be probably valuable if we standardize what is the checkpoint state that each client should obtain to start operating. It includes the beacon state, this deposit data in the compressed form, and potentially some metadata for the network. So you are not mixing networks by mistake.
Right, I see. So if you have a branch, if you have a branch anywhere in the tree and you append to the right, then you should be able to form the root, right? So you're saying, in addition to the beacon state, you should also have a recent deposit and proof, essentially a branch in that tree, so then you can always kind of grow to the right by appending new deposits.
Well, it's roughly equivalent to a proof in size, but more precisely, it's exactly the state of the deposit contract. So it's you have to examine it more carefully. It's not exactly a proof, but it's similar in spirit, so to speak.
Right, because the state of the deposit contract is carrying essentially one of the most recent branch and growing from there. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, we can. Are there any more thoughts here? Otherwise, we can talk about it in the Telegram. Okay. Great. And were there any other networking items that there might be? Oh, Gossip Sub V11. Ben from Sigma Prime posted something on the specs repo a while ago and kind of the generation of the params. I haven't reviewed that yet, but I do think that it's about time for more than a few of us to review it and get this into the specs. Age, do you think is it safe for just a few nodes to deploy the rewards parameters, or does it need to kind of happen all at once?
I mean, Ben can comment more on this if he wants to, but we have a few nodes that have it, and you can kind of see how they score everybody else on the network, so that's fine. They don't really affect anything else. But in order for the network to function, everyone kind of has to be on the same spec level. You can't have people get penalized if they're not sending messages when you expect them to. So if people are subscribing to topics while they're syncing, for example, then they'll get kicked out of the mesh and get scored badly. Or if we're not aligned on our message IDs, things like that, you can cause
chaos.
Your nodes to score other nodes down. So if Lighthouse merged it into Master, for example, and all the Lighthouse nodes had scoring, it's likely that we could segregate ourselves via gossip and just only talk to other Lighthouse nodes.
Right. It might be worthwhile spinning up a small network before we push out to Madasha with a bunch of the clients to see if there's any bad behaviors that we're not catching right now.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
One problem or one thing we always have to think about when talking about gossip subparameters, that it depends strongly on the number of validators, how many messages we see.
Right.
So this is also why maybe the behavior on Madasha is different than on a small test network for those parameters.
Right. Right. Is there, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but is there a way to dynamically adjust those as the validator size, adjust the scoring parameters as a function of the validator size? Like, can the application?
Yeah, this is basic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
This is basically what we tried, and why I proposed in this issue a Python script that basically computes the.
Right.
Or it's basically a bigger formula for computing the parameters based on the number of validators. Mm-hmm. And currently we are just updating them regularly in Lighthouse, or in the test. In peers, we are testing it currently.
So updating them manually, like via a different release of the software?
Oh no! This is done really
from the application layer
during runtime.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. Is that custom functionality that you had to build on REST P2P, or is that standard functionality with respect to the new Gossip Sub V11?
Since we basically implemented the Gossip Sub V11 for libpeer-to-peer, we also added this functionality.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think Go's planning on doing as well, right? Resetting the scores.
Yes, there was also talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so there might be a little bit more legwork to do to get this in other languages. Okay. Ben has an issue up, a recent comment and an issue on the specs repo. If you are one of the networking folks from your team, please take a look at this script. We need a couple of eyes to review this before we define these parameters, and we could use some help. I'll share the link in a minute. Any other thoughts on V11, scoring params, or anything else? Okay, great. Any other networking related items? Great. So this is the comment in the issue that I'd love for people to take a look at. Ben's put in a lot of work to get this script running, and we need to vet it before we make it part of the spec. So take a look at that. I might knock on your door in the next day or so, if you don't. Thank you. Moving on, general spec discussion. Anything here? Great. Open discussion, closing remarks. Anything else on your mind?
How's progress on the BLST audit?
It's great. There's been a couple of minor issues in reports over the past couple of weeks, and we expect to have not the final completed report done early next week, but the kind of final wave of feedback, at which point I think we can pull the trigger on everything. Cool. Anything else? Dankared, you unmuted. You got something for us?
I just wonder if someone knows, like, looking at Medasha, it seems like there is like the inactivity leak in progress, but it doesn't seem to correspond to like an increase in participation that you would expect. Does anyone know why this is?
So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Our best guess right now is an instability in Prism. It seems that every 2, 4, or 8 epochs, there's high resource consumption, which is causing kind of instabilities. You see the participation rate grow, and then you see it kind of distinctly diminish. And at least on the prismatics nodes, they're seeing this high resource consumption. It's being investigated, but that's our best guess at the moment. Yeah.
I guess one interesting analysis, anyone has the easy access to that, would be like to see what if you take all the validators that have been online for, like, say 100 epochs, what's
the total percentage
upper limit? And if it's like much more than what we're seeing, then that indicates that there's a pretty big problem, and that might be related to the forking that Alex was seeing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna spend some time kind of poking around. Prismatic team is working on an update to release on the resource consumption issue they're seeing, and I think Barnaby might have some scripts that would allow us to easily check out the kind of overall participation. So maybe we can get that number by tomorrow. Thank you. Anything else here? Great. Well, keep up the good work. Talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.